"Why did I let you talk me into this?" Kayla whispered, her voice tinged with anxiety. Amber, resplendent in a glamorous red gown, grinned mischievously. "Come on, Kayla, it'll be fun. Besides, you need to catch up with old friends." "Old acquaintances, you mean?" Kayla muttered under her breath as she looked around the ballroom. Was she at her 20-year high school reunion or a posh multi-million-dollar wedding reception? She tugged at the hem of the black mini dress she'd borrowed from her childhood best friend. Nothing Kayla owned would have been appropriate for the evening, and she wasn't about to drop $1,000 on a dress for one night. In this circle, the one she'd run away from, anything less, and you might as well be wearing rags. The dress, heels, and accessories Amber had forced her to wear easily cost $5,000. "Stop messing with it. You look great." Amber smacked at her hand. "You are a good 3 inches shorter than me, making this dress. It's called a mini dress for a reason, and if I had your legs, I'd be wearing it every single Friday night." Amber handed her a glass of champagne. "Take this and drink. Relax. We've known all these people since we were 3. She wasn't lying. They'd all attended the same private preschool before going on to elementary, middle, and then high school together. Every member of her graduating class was a millionaire's kid. The heavy crystal-stemmed glass she held contained the priciest of champagnes. They grew up in one of the most exclusive neighborhoods in the Denver metropolitan area. Residents of Cherry River were wealthier than 99% of Americans, and they let you know it. She went to a renowned and prestigious public high school zoned for their neighborhood's residents only. Amber grabbed her arm, eyes shining. "Oh my God, look! There's Coach Anderson. Do you remember how he used to yell at us in gym class?" Kayla forced a smile, scanning the room. A few familiar faces lit up in recognition, waving and calling out hellos. Kayla hadn't spoken to most of these people in 15 years. Occasionally, she'd drop a comment on a social media post, but after undergrad, most of her high school friends married wealthy men and looked down on her when she'd pursued a doctorate in veterinary science. "Let's hit up the buffet," Kayla suggested, nodding to the appetizer and dessert set up on the side of the room. The invitation boasted cocktails and caviar reception with a variety of hors d'oeuvres. A foodie at heart, Kayla planned on hanging out at the buffet, eating her weight in overpriced appetizers and imported chocolate before heading back to her parents' house. They were vacationing in Europe, so she had the place all to herself and was looking forward to a nice long soak in their hot tub. "1 hour and I'm out of here. Hot tub is calling my name," she told Amber. "Spoil sport," Amber said, linking an arm through Kayla's as they headed toward the buffet. Kayla picked up one of the small plates and laughed. "This will hold all of 2 bites of food." She offered a plate to Amber, who shook her head. "Eat in this dress," Amber laughed. "Take the plate. Walk behind me. I'm going to put my food on it too. There are some empty high-top tables over there we can stand at." Kayla nodded to the table with a wall behind it. She could hide out there. "Sure, but we will work the room after you are done eating," Amber said, holding out a plate for Kayla to place a smoked trout croquette on. After placing the small plate, laden with as much food as Kayla could fit, on the table, Amber waved down a waiter and grabbed 2 more drinks for them. Kayla shook her head and waved the waiter back over to them. "I'm driving tonight. Can I please get a Coke?" She handed the waiter a $5 bill, and he smiled widely at her. "I'll keep them coming for you." As the waiter left, a whirlwind of energy approached them. It was Lori Ann Cunningham, the high school head cheerleader, president of the student council, and former homecoming queen. She wore a dazzling smile that seemed a little too bright, and her platinum blonde hair looked unnatural on the natural brunette. "Amber, Kayla!" Lori Ann squealed as she hugged them both, a bit too enthusiastically. "It's been forever." Kayla managed a polite smile. though she felt like a deer in headlights. Yes, it has. They'd run with different crowds in high school. Kayla never counted her as a friend. Let me catch you up and then maybe you can tell me about your little life, Lori Ann said. I think you meant a little about your life, not your little life, Kayla corrected. Lori Ann blinked slowly at her before launching into a monologue about her past 20 years. Kayla tried to keep her face emotionless as her former classmate listed her many accomplishments, including sorority president, college homecoming queen, and now she was a successful real estate agent working for her husband's multi-million-dollar real estate development firm. It was hard to not roll her eyes as the woman painted a picture, perfect life with a veneer of fakeness. As the conversation progressed, despite her college education and accomplishments, Lori Ann's words often lacked depth and common sense. She giggled excessively and was quick to dismiss any topic that required more than surface-level conversation. Her transformation from high school beauty queen to a modern-day Barbie doll was undeniable. We will never become one of those Stepford wives. Amber and Kayla made the pinky promise their senior year of high school as they looked out across the swarm of impeccably dressed mothers who'd gathered to gossip while they waited for the younger children to be let out of school. The girls were waiting to pick up their younger siblings. Her classmates, the next generation of trophy wives, filled the room, and Kayla couldn't help but feel completely out of place. She'd left Cherry River and outside of a few holiday trips home to see her parents and siblings, stayed away. Glitz and glam weren't her. She built her own life, one she was proud of. As Lori Ann rambled on, she proudly mentioned her son, a high school football player starting varsity as a freshman. I graduated with a degree in fashion in May, got married in June, and had Archie Ray on Valentine's Day. You are probably wondering, if she has a degree in fashion, what is she doing in real estate? Lori Ann didn't wait for either woman to say anything before continuing. My husband bought me a boutique. I still get to dabble in fashion a couple of times a month when I drop in and decide what we are going to buy. But when I got married, I fell in love with not only the man, but real estate too. Selling beautiful houses to beautiful people is just so fulfilling. I'm glad you found your calling, Kayla choked out. She glanced around the room, hoping for an escape. Looking down at her now empty plate, she was about to excuse herself back to the buffet when Lori Ann spoke again. Speaking of my husband, she waved over the large man who had been lurking in the background. As the menacing figure, with dark hair, cold, calculating eyes, and a cruel smile approached, Kayla choked on the cracker with caviar she'd just taken a bite out of. Are you okay? Amber asked, handing Kayla her glass of Coke. Kayla took it and drank slowly. Swallowed wrong, she finally choked out. Zach's piercing gaze sent shivers down Kayla's spine. He was the source of her painful past, a past she had hoped to leave behind forever. Why was he here? Oh yeah, he was Lori Ann's husband. Quickly doing the math, Kayla's stomach dropped. Zach and Lori Ann had a 15-year-old son, but she'd broken up with him 12 years ago. That could only mean one thing. Zach cheated on Lori Ann with her. Their entire relationship was a lie. As Lori Ann introduced her to Zach, she forced a polite smile, her grip on her glass tightening. Nice to meet you, she said, her voice steady as she extended her hand. Zachary's blue eyes locked onto hers, a sly grin playing on his lips. Likewise, Kayla, he purred. His voice was like sandpaper, grating against her nerves. Kayla shuddered, forcing herself to hold his gaze. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing her fear. The room seemed to fade away as the memories of their past relationship flooded back with the touch of his hand. But Kayla couldn't let on that she recognized him. She couldn't let him know the impact he had on her life. Walked past the bathrooms and out toward the entrance of the building, choosing fresh air over cold water. She burst through the doors and into the cool night air, gulping it down in ragged breaths. Her heart hammered against her ribcage as she leaned back against the brick wall, unable to shake the feeling of foreboding hanging over her. The parking lot was empty, music and laughter from the reunion muffled behind the doors. Crickets chirped in the surrounding bushes, a lone streetlight at the end of the lot buzzing as moths fluttered around its dim glow. Kayla closed her eyes, trying to steady her breathing. A twig snapped in the darkness. Her eyes flew open as a dark figure emerged from the shadows. Zach came to a stop before her, a predatory gleam in his eyes as he gazed down at her. "Kayla," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "What a pleasant surprise to see you here tonight." He stepped closer, his eyes narrowing. "Now you know, I'm married. Lori Ann and I have built a successful real estate empire together." Kayla's throat tightened. "Good for you. Why don't you go back to your wife?" she replied, attempting to sound disinterested. She flattened herself against the wall, trembling under the intensity of his stare. "Tisk, tisk! I trained you better than that." Kayla's breath caught in her throat. She remembered all too well the pain, the humiliation, the fear. The scars on her back were a constant reminder. "You remember how to answer me correctly, don't you, my little pet?" She flinched at the endearment, stomach churning. She longed to wipe the smirk off his face, to tell Amber and Lori Ann the truth about this monster and all the pain he'd caused. But she couldn't. She'd spent too long burying the past to drag it into the light now. She forced a tight smile. "It was a long time ago, Zachary." "Maybe." He leaned in close, breath hot against her ear. "But you'll always be mine. I was married to Lori Ann the entire time we were together, Kayla. She's not like you. She is a wham, bam, thank you ma'am type of lay. I can't play with her the way I did you. I miss it, you know. Having a piece of ass, I could do whatever I wanted to. I miss hearing you scream and beg. You were mine then, and a part of you will always belong to me." Her heart pounded as she struggled to maintain her composure. Zach's words were like a punch to the gut, reopening old wounds she had fought so hard to close. "Fuck you, Zach. I will never be yours." Zachary's eyes darkened. "You seem to be under the mistaken impression that you can talk to me however you'd like." He seized her by the arms, fingers biting into her flesh. Kayla struggled against his grip, panic rising in her chest. She had spent years putting the pieces of her life back together after Zachary tore it apart. She couldn't let him destroy her again. "Let go of me," she demanded, her gaze sliding past him to search the shadows for any sign of help. But they were alone, and she was at his mercy. Zachary gave her a rough shake, snapping her attention back to him. "I own you," he growled. "I always have, and I always will. You're my slave, my pet, my pain toy." His eyes moved slowly, inch by inch from her head to her toes, as if assessing her like a piece of merchandise. The way he looked at her felt invasive, as if he were stripping away her privacy with each passing moment. She felt exposed, vulnerable as his eyes lingered on her body. It was as if his gaze was trying to penetrate her. Once again, Zach had her feelings objectified and violated. The intensity of his stare weighed her down. Her discomfort grew when he licked his lips as if he wanted to devour her. His laugh at her discomfort made her acutely aware of the need to distance herself from this man and his creepy, predatory gaze. "I always knew you would be a veterinarian, but why in Grand Ridge? I've never even heard of it. How small is the town?" She'd blocked him on all social media years ago and never befriended Lori Ann. Why? They weren't friends in high school. Why would she be friends with her in adulthood? Kayla, for the first time ever, found herself wishing she'd been more active on social media. If she'd known they were married, she'd never have agreed to come to the reunion. "I have nothing to say to you, Zach." She shook free from his grasp and turned her back on him, dismissing him as she took a step closer to the front door. She needed to get inside where she'd be safe in a crowd of people. He moved around to stand in front of her, his presence oppressive. He moved closer to her, pushing her backwards until she hit the wall. "You never told Amber, did you? About us, about everything we shared." Kayla's throat tightened, panic swelling inside her chest. No, she hadn't told Amber, hadn't told anyone. But Jane. Even then, she'd only broadly mentioned having been hurt by an ex-boyfriend. The things Zach did to her, the way he hurt her, they were her deepest shame. She'd never spoken them out loud. "There's nothing to tell." Her voice sounded strangely distant, as if it belonged to someone else. "We dated for a few months in college. It didn't work out. You can deny it all you want, but you'll never escape me. I live rent-free in your mind. I bet you think about everything I did to you and get off." Kayla could barely see through the haze of panic and pain descending upon her. She had to get out of here before she shattered into a million pieces, the past she'd tried so hard to bury exploding into the light all around her. "You're mine." And she feared it might always be true. He'd chained her to him with the nightmares that invaded her brain as she tried to sleep. "You should be careful, Kayla. You know how easily I can make things unpleasant. If you ever breathe a word of our past to Lorianne or anyone else, I'll make sure you regret it. You remember what I'm capable of, don't you?" Her voice trembled as she responded, "You don't scare me anymore, Zach." After all these years, she still wasn't sure she could escape him. "You are a liar, Kayla. I will always terrify you. You tremble with fear in front of me as you remember how skillfully I played your body." He grabbed her arms once again, squeezing roughly. His cruel words struck a chord of terror in her soul. The scars on her body throbbed as if an echo of the lash and the bite of the leather. She could feel the ghost of his hands on her flesh, hear the snap of the whip and her own broken screams. Kayla squeezed her eyes shut against the memories, struggling to draw a full breath. She wouldn't break. Not again. Not for him. "No," she said, gaze flashing open to meet him. She wrenched an arm free of his grip and slammed her fist into his nose while simultaneously lifting her knee into his groin. Zachary grunted in surprise and pain, releasing her other arm to clasp his hands over his face as he bent forward in pain. Blood trickled between his fingers as he stared at her in shock and rage. Kayla didn't hesitate. She turned and ran into the night, pulse pounding in her ears. She had escaped him once before. She could do it again. She would do it again. Zachary's enraged shout followed her into the darkness. "You bitch! You'll pay for this!" Kayla slipped off her heels and kept running. She sprinted across the asphalt, fingers fumbling in her small handbag for her keys. Her hands shook so badly she could barely open the door. Inside. Start the engine. Lock the doors. Kayla sagged against the seat, drawing deep breaths to steady her nerves. Zach wouldn't follow her. Not tonight. She was safe for now. Shaking herself, she rewrote the narrative. She was a grown adult in charge of her own actions and happiness. She could escape this nightmare, and she would. She pictured Zachary standing alone, bleeding in the shadows, and allowed the image to fuel her. Pulling into the driveway of her parents' house, she changed her mind about staying the weekend. She needed to be home, her home, where Zach was not. Quickly, she grabbed her suitcase from the front closet and sprinted to her childhood bedroom. In no time, she'd changed her clothes and left Amber's dress and jewelry on the bed. She sent a quick text to Amber, apologizing and Venmoing her enough for dry cleaning and replacement heels. She'd text her the housekeeper's information tomorrow so she could pick up her things. After slipping on a pair of her comfiest tennis shoes, she locked up the house, bound down her parents' steps and into her truck. As she drove back to Grand Ridge, tears welled in her eyes. The road ahead was blurred by her emotions, but the memories were painfully clear. She had escaped Zach once, and she couldn't let him back into her life, not even as a memory. Kayla's thoughts turned to Dr. Jane Wallace, her late mentor and close friend. It was Jane who helped her heal after Zach and then build a new life in Grand Ridge. She'd shown her kindness and support when she needed it most. She clung to the memories of Jane's guidance and strength, determined to protect the life she had fought so hard to create. Her knuckles ached where she'd struck him, but she felt no regret. She had fought back this time. She was stronger now, thanks to Jane's love and patience. She'd insisted Kayla take self-defense classes with her. She'd told her it was necessary to know how to protect herself, especially traveling to remote ranches and farms where she might come across unsavory characters. Jane. Kayla went to Grand Ridge to spend 2 years in residency under Jane's tutelage. She'd planned on moving to the East Coast after getting her license and starting her own practice in Maine, but fate had other plans. It wasn't just veterinary medicine Jane taught her. She became a second mother to Kayla, and when she passed from late-stage colon cancer, left Grand Ridge Animal Hospital to her. Her mentor had saved her once and given her the courage to build a new life. Kayla gripped the steering wheel tighter, blinking back tears. She wouldn't fail Jane's memory by giving in to fear and running away. She wasn't the same girl she'd been a decade ago. The familiar turns of the mountain road soothed her frazzled nerves as she climbed higher into the night. Closer to home, the scattered lights of Grand Ridge flickered through the trees as Kayla crested the final hill. Her shoulders relaxed, the vice-like grip on the steering wheel easing. Almost there. As she turned onto Main Street, the familiar shops and restaurants welcomed her like old friends. The Rusty Crab, where she and her friends gathered for beers on Friday nights with a row of motorcycles out front. Maddock. She saw him sitting against the window, laughing with his friends. They'd been on a couple of dates and he'd texted her to check on her before the reunion. Maddock was nothing like Zach. He was respectful and safe. As she drove by the quirky antique store Emma loved to browse in her little veterinary clinic, she let out a deep breath. Home. She was home. Kayla parked in front of her house, a cozy log cabin with a sprawling front porch. Emma's Jeep was there, her friend no doubt waiting up to hear all about the reunion. She texted her from her parents' house letting her know she was coming back early and wouldn't need her to pet sit this weekend after all. For a moment, Kayla sat in silence, staring at the golden light spilling from the windows. A place of refuge she once thought she'd never find. It was hers, and hers alone. Zachary couldn't touch it. He couldn't touch her, not here, not now. Kayla stepped out of the car and onto the gravel drive, tilting her face up to the starry sky. The familiar scent of pine and earth filled her senses, cleansing away the lingering traces of Zach's cologne. When she walked through the front door, her golden retrievers would wag their tails in joy. Emma would be there to greet her with a warm hug. There would be no questions, no judgment, just love and acceptance from her best friend. Home. Not the childhood house she grew up in, not the room full of fake people and their boasting accomplishments. This simple cabin in a small, cozy town nestled deep in the majestic Rocky Mountains. Kayla breathed deep again, letting the peace of this place seep into her bones. Grand Ridge had given her a new beginning, a chance to heal, to grow stronger, surer of herself and her own strength. She wouldn't let the run-in with Zach ruin her peace.